Hello.
Good evening or afternoon for you all, I guess.
Are you East Coast or Central?
East Coast. So it's
Okay,
7 right now.
gotcha. Gotcha.
Hello, Eric. Hello, hello, Jimmy.
Hello.
Jimmy, is the weather a lot nicer already on the East Coast?
Yeah, like today it was in the high 70s, low 80s. Humidity's around 20-30%, I think. So it's not bad. I mean, it rained a lot this weekend, but today was really nice. This time of year, like in May, towards like the end of May, it's really nice. And then June, it just gets like surface of the sun hot.
It's currently really cold. I think it's still really cold in Seattle. I'm just trying to figure out what is the Fahrenheit. So today is high of 60, low of 46.
Yeah, that's like end of April, beginning of May down here.
Yeah, it can't decide whether it's gonna be a good day or not. Like every 3 days, maybe we'll get like a sunny day that's like really nice, and then it will just dump rain for like 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, I mean, I've only been to the Northwest like twice, like once in Portland and then once in Seattle. I spent some time at Google, I think in the Fremont area, I guess is where it was. And
Oh yeah.
I Portland, I was there long enough where it didn't rain, but when I was at Google for a couple of days, it did rain every day. So
Seattle weather has changed. Like I remember 10 years ago when I just got here, it's like drizzling, a little bit of drizzle here and there. And now it's like pouring for like a few hours and then the sun would come out and um, it's kind of nice. At least we get to see a little bit of sun. We saw a little bit of sun on the weekend. Okay, I think, oh, hello, Teja. Good to see you.
Hello.
Haven't seen you for a couple of weeks, Teja.
Hi, it's getting really busy. Initially, it was good, but now I think very busy. And several meetings, I don't know, this is the time, several town halls or monthly business reviews, they're being scheduled. I have to see, I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for dropping by when you have time.
thank you.
Okay, let's get started. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, I got it.
Great. I've tried to add some agenda items that I had today. Feel free to add or edit the list. So we have some pending pull requests from last week. So when you have a chance, please have a look at the end-to-end test again. I've addressed some feedback like updating the curl commands and like removing doing some tidying up of the comments, etc. And it's ready for review again. And the other one, Eric, we talked about releasing the patch so the namespace is handled correctly. So I just need an approval for that to update our version in the chart.
Okay.
And then I can go ahead and do a release tomorrow.
Okay. I will go give that a blessing.
Thank you. And I have a question about these dependabot update. Why does the library have incompatible in the name?
I think that's a Go mod thing. I'd have to look it up. I assume so. Are these are direct? These are like direct project dependency.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know.
Okay, no
I-
problem. Do you know what we use the Azure SDK for?
If I had to guess, I'd probably say, I guess that's a good question. What do we use that for? If I had to guess, it'd be something to do with Key Vault, but or it might be off. It might be the auth provider actually. Akash, did that get added?
I
Okay.
think it's the part of the MSAL confidential client needed. It might be.
Oh, the identity stuff.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And it's version 63. Yeah, I always the versions of the or the Azure SDKs are always kind of weird because 63, 64, like technically is supposed to be like breaking change, but the SDK like surface is so big that breaking change is probably just in some other random package that doesn't affect us.
In the future, should we add some end-to-end scenario for the key vault and the workload identity scenario?
I mean, personally, I'm all for adding as much E2E as possible. We would have to find out if we can, since this would rely on Azure resources, we'd probably have to go find out what the deal is with us, like with Microsoft sponsoring like open source utilization for this kind of thing, because it would be good to get like a subscription that was like dedicated to the project so that E2E stuff could be put there, and then the cost of that would, I don't know how that'd work. So
yeah, there's some like logistic to be figured out.
Yeah,
Good point. So to validate this dependency update, like would you recommend, like if it's authentication related, just to do a Azure workload identity test to see if it can continue to access the key vault and the registry?
Yeah, that would probably, the best thing would probably be to run through, because this would only be for the identity stuff. So it would just be for somebody to set up a test scenario where they utilize identity credentials for a registry. And as long as that still works with that bump, then I think it's fine.
Yep, sounds good. I can, like during testing this week, I can take a look at this.
Okay. Cool.
And what about the Docker CLI?
That's a patch release, so that's probably safe.
Okay. Like, do you think the like the basic getting started, quick start end-to-end would cover it?
Probably the quick answer is probably for the Docker CLI. This is probably for Docker config. I would think. Maybe Akash might know.
Docker config.
Yeah, just checking the code right now, but yeah, I think it is for the Docker config stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, this would just be, rather than using workload identity, you could verify this with Docker config.
Username and password.
Yep, it's the basic Docker config file, so the default auth model.
I see. So since our basic end-to-end doesn't have any sort of authentication, so for anything involved authentication, we'll just do it manually for now.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we think about how to automate this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Sounds good.
Yeah, we could potentially do the Kubernetes secret provider because that's not cloud specific. But the other one, the workload identity would have to be Azure related. So we'd have to figure out the whole costing stuff too. So.
Are there, and this is more my less, so like in Rust there, when you're writing stuff, you can put things behind compiler flags, like feature flags. Does Go have that concept?
I'm not sure. Maybe it does, although Go is very lean, so extra
Maybe
functionality, maybe not. But
yeah, I'd have to look. It would just be interesting to know if there was a way that you could like feature flag things like that so that you could, I guess from a test perspective, it doesn't make that big of a difference, but just if you wanted to compile with different amounts of dependencies. But anyways, for the bottom one, for the RC1, we're waiting on bumping that because that technically changes some of the spec that we use.
yeah, so there's two reasons. One is there's actually no way right now to test it because at least for ACR, we don't support RC1 yet. So at least we should have one registry that's ready to go, whether that's like distribution, open source, or one of the cloud providers container registries too.
Right, and then distribution is still in PR, RC1 support, right?
Yeah, I'm in like third round of reviews for that. So hopefully we can get that merged.
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha. That makes sense. Cool.
Just back to the Docker CLI dependency update. So we can we set up a registry? Is there any free registry out there that you can set up a basic credential? Is ACR free?
Oris, you mean just an Oris ready registry?
Yeah.
So I have one set up on an EKS cluster. So yeah, they do exist, and you can turn on it's an Oris distribution registry, and you can turn on basic auth. So I've been able to make that work, but the problem is it doesn't seem to work with the notation client. So I can store things up there with the Docker client. I can go in there and discover with using an Oris client. But when I go to use the notation client, the basic auth is incompatible between the notation client and the Oris registry. And there's a little bit of flux right now with regards to what's happening with the notation client. It seems to be that what I've been reading is they're going to be taking more of the Oris Go libraries and using them with the notation client, but I don't know how far they are with that. Maybe
yeah,
news.
There's a very large refactor going on in, I think, in Oris and or notation.
Yeah, so
but yeah, as far as like you're asking about like a cloud hosted registry that we could use, or just one that we could use in like a E2E?
Just one we can use in the E2E. So if we just create a registry, configure the authentication, push some stuff to it, like, or we were talking about setting up a registry in the cluster.
So if your end-to-end could run Docker containers, then yeah, the Oris registry you'd be able to do that, I think, because you could tell it what configuration file to use, and that you could set up your basic auth if you wanted, or you could have it wide open if you wanted.
I know for if we're looking at E2E within GitHub Actions, they do support running like containers alongside the one you're like whatever system under test you have. So we would definitely be able to run the Oris distribution, or as soon as the PR gets merged, a container of just distribution with artifact support. So and then you'd be able to configure it. So we could do that just to have registries for E2E within GitHub Actions, but if the goal was to actually exercise like a particular vendor's registry, if there were specific things that we needed to exercise, then we would have to work with them. So like for Microsoft, if we wanted to do ACR specific things, we'd have to figure out how we could get support to be able to do that. And similarly for AK or AWS.
So I put a link in the chat of the ORS registry that I've been using because our ECR is not yet ORS ready. So I've been using that in my EKS cluster to do some testing. And there's a pretty good blog post out there. I'll find that as well. I'll put it in there.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just thought it'll be good to add more test scenarios into our E2E so we can reduce the manual validations on the dependency updates. Cool, so that's all our pending PRs. Any additional comments on our E2E PR?
Thank you for getting it done.
Okay, thanks, Ajay. Oh, okay, I'll leave it open for now, and then we'll check again next week. So if you're happy with it, please sign up. So then all the future PRs would run with the basic validation. Okay. Next on our agenda is yes, I've got the link open. I've started looking at the dynamic configuration. So I've started this document to capture like the proposed changes. So I've written down here, like, to get started, we'll implement with the file watcher-based implementation. Okay, I'm not signed in. That's what.
Just the one recommended by Lee and that team.
Step number 2 is recommended by Lee, and also we've talked about it before as well, to enable the configurable CRDs. So Lee have created this issue 193, and he specifically called out that the verifier and the store should be configurable. So I've linked the issues up here. So I've been playing around with the file watcher implementation, and I just have like the executor interface updates so far. So I've added the reload methods to reload, like on configuration change, we can reload the store and other components in the executor struct. And I'm also adding a synchronization variable. So then we can, during verification, we can lock all the configuration. So all the existing stuff is up here, and anything new I've marked with a comment. That's what's being added. I don't know if it's possible to make it bold within the Go syntax. Is that possible?
You mean for like syntax highlighting here?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think so.
Yeah, I tried the star, but it didn't, like, it just star came out. So I just marked
Yeah.
comment to mark that this is new.
Did you, for the case where it's in cluster, did you get into the HTTP serve, the internals of that, or is that Go routine based?
Oh, I don't have the VS Code loaded, but yes, I think it opens up a channel. And I think it is a Go routine in the serve method, in the serve.go, but it's in, I don't remember which method it is. Like, I'm just using it as an entry point to watch the file.
Okay, gotcha. Because this is, so the goal of the mutex here is to synchronize the entire executor. or individual components?
So first of all, one of the goal is whatever we're adding here, it should support the CRDs in the future. So I was imagining for file-based watcher, like we need to load the entire file, right? So if we detected a file change, we'll try to acquire the lock and then release it after all the components have been updated. But if it's CRD, we only need to lock one component. Like if we're updating the referrer store, then we do a lock and then update the store and then release the lock.
Right, right.
And for the entire verification, we want to, like, as soon as we start validating, we should lock and then release only after we've already have the result.
Right. Yeah, that was the only thing I was going to say. If instead of sync mutex, if you do a sync RW mutex, then if it's being used in a server context, like if you have multiple requests that are currently being processed and they are all have read locks, then if you go to change the config with a write lock, it will wait until all those requests finish getting served, and then it will update the config, and then future requests can will have read lock with the new config. So like it will just have like single writer, multi-reader lock.
Got it. Okay, so what is it? Can you type it in the
Yeah,
chat? I'll look it up.
Yeah. So this would be sync. Let's see. I think the package is sync RD mutex. So pretty much, it will pretty much be the same, except for the
type.
The type of like rlock versus lock might work better for when it's being used in like HTTP server. Although I mean, I don't think our request volume will be so big that it matters that much, but it's something.
Yeah, thanks for the suggestion. And I also have some question about that Lee mentioned the store and the verifier should be configurable, and looking at the executor, like we also have the some timeout configuration for the executor and the policy that we recently added. Should they also be like, can everything be refreshed?
Yeah, so within a verifier, so a reference verifier, VR reference verifier, each of those will have configs within them. So the config file kind of gets chunked up and then given to individual objects within all these arrays. So I think with him, let's see, can all configuration be reloaded, not limited to store person? So I think the answer should be, yeah, you should be able to reload the entire thing.
Okay, so we'll have like reload policy enforcer as well.
Can all configuration be reloaded, not limited to store verifiers? Yeah, like if we're going to support hot reloads of the whole config file, which is what File Watcher essentially does, right? File Watcher is just going to watch the whole file, which means they're hot reloading the entire thing. So unless we did anything special in our logic, like when we look at the file, like what's new, we would probably just hand a new config and we'd have to reconcile it. So I feel like since we won't know where the changes, you'd probably, like for File Watcher at least, you'd have to reconcile the config for the entire thing. Like if it's CRD based, you know, when a CRD is updated, you know exactly the reference that it's referring to. So you only have to update one thing. But for File Watcher, you'll have to reconcile the whole everything.
Yeah. And just to clarify, we're not doing a diff to find out what's changed. We're just kind of pausing everything again.
Yeah. I mean, I don't feel like it will be that expensive to do. Like, I think the only thing that would have some overhead from getting reinitialized is the store. because the auth, if we go through token acquisition when the config, when it is loaded, then that will have overhead. But I think everything else is just making objects, which should be cheap.
Yep. And the auth cache is currently instantiated at the store level. So if you reload the store, it's going to dump the local cache for that too. So it would basically, any new requests would have to go through the flow again for auth.
But that doesn't happen until a request, is
Yes.
what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So it will, so the first request after a hot reload will be expensive from a store perspective, but everything else should be negligible.
So in the future, there might be value that where we try to diff, and if the cache, like say the credential wasn't changed, we should not refresh that.
Yeah, we could have a you could, like, for certain things, you could have a reconcile where if like we talked about, instead of trying to do a reconcile, if you just deleted everything and you reinitialized everything, that's like the most naive solution, and that would work and have fairly low overhead. But yeah, if there were things that would cause expense during request, you could try to reconcile and say, if the new config that's passed in is the same as my existing one, to just not do anything.
Yep. Sajay, you have a comment?
Yeah, it just brings back some history from performance engineering. I would say, whatever you do, don't pre-optimize, let's measure. So if you have any reloading path, just make sure we measure both, like you said, the first request and the time to reload and things like that, so that you can correlate the two. And then if we are fixing it, then we can track what we are fixing also, right? So maybe just let's go ahead and implement this and see on a second path of how we end up with having to optimize it. So if you do have concerns, my thinking is, in the change, make sure you have timing information either in debug logs or something that gives you clear indication that this happened. So that when you do go and optimize it, you can track that, yes, this actually did make sense.
Yeah. So for performance, measuring, is it similar to what Akash did for the timeout issue? Akash, is there any tool that you used for measuring, like the checkpoints of different steps?
No, I just set timers in different routines to see. I can share some of the code that I used for that, but it was pretty basic. Just stitching all of that information together and calculating the intervals, and then logging all of that in the debug log as well. So
I see. Okay. I also look around to see if there's any tools.
Yeah, maybe there's some better way of doing it.
Cool. My next question is, so when I'm playing with the file watcher, so what I read up on the internet was, like, depending on what program you use, for example, I used Nano to update the configuration file, and one save event resulted in two separate write triggers. So I was wondering, how do we process this efficiently? Like, one of the things that I thought was, like, we could push it in a stack and, or only process the later one, or like if they're duplicates. Does anyone have any suggestion on handling this bug? I think on the file system notify library, FS notify library, like someone created an issue for this problem.
So you get two events?
Yeah, you get two write events, and we don't want to pause it twice.
You could, I mean, one way from a Go perspective you could do it is you could just have a context, and you could cancel the context if you get another event while you're trying to process the first one. So that would be an option.
Yeah, we only care about write events, right? Like,
yes, yeah.
so if we get true, the second one we'll try to process the first one, and the second one we would say, oh, we just processed one, let's cancel that. Is that how it works?
Do you use any hash or something to find out, was there any change from the last state of the file, config file? Or is it just you assume that the moment you get right, you just go and process it?
Yeah, at the moment with my simple implementation, I'm just processing it, but I'm noticing like multiple events can come in. So Teja, are you suggesting using a hash to kind of identify, oh, we have,
Yeah.
let's say we have a hash of the file of the change.
Yeah.
It'll be like,
Yeah.
oh, the hash did not change, let's not do anything.
Kind of that's one way to dedupe them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
That's a good idea.
I'm just missing the big picture. Maybe this document, if you can share, yeah, I can do an offline review.
Yeah, that'll be great. It's linked in the meeting notes.
Okay,
So it's under the discussion agenda.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Teja. Drive safe. I heard some car noise. Yeah, that's all my questions so far. So I'm still trying to play with it. Any other concerns that anyone can see?
Not here. I don't think so. The open questions was just added. Can all configures. Oh, so the open question number 1 is probably just because the only methods added to the interface are for store verifier. So if we add, I guess, let's see, so if we could add methods to address the other configs.
Yeah.
And was there another, or just this?
Yeah,
There was
just
only one. Okay.
yeah, I'll probably have more question next week as I try to implement this. Okay, that's everything in this doc. Is there any other agenda items that people want to discuss?
I had,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, so last week we talked with Lee about some of the proposals that they had. And I had a question actually for Teja, since we have you this week, if you're able to respond. The proposal that Lee had was, part of it was to decouple the verifier from the refer store. And I thought of some cases why we might want the verifiers to have access to the store. But I wanted to ask, since you did the original implementation, if there were reasons that you had specifically for why the verifier should have access to the store, rather than just passing one blob to the verifier. Did we lose Teja? Oh no, she's there. So yeah, that's the question. Is there any harm in passing just a single blob, or were there more reasons for letting the verifier have the store? And we can also add, we can do discussion directly in the
Issue.
the GitHub issue. Yeah, so that was, so asynchronously, that's the question. I did some
Sorry, Eric. I was trying to unmute.
Oh
Eric,
yeah,
I think you were in first why store has to be passed to the verifier. There was a path where notation or something has to download additional content as part of the verification. I remember we were both involved as to why we needed the store handle to the verifier.
Mhm.
Once I get back to my computer, I think I can get you the concrete answer.
Okay. Yeah, that was my only my thought was, yeah, I don't want to prescribe like for the verifier, what the only things that it has access to. So that was my like response to, we should only have, like, we should let the verifier decide what it needs. And I think their argument was that every verifier should just be concerned with one blob. So it shouldn't have to have more, but I don't know. I didn't have a ton of like good examples off the top of my head of what like verifiers or like hypothetical verifiers that might want to download more stuff, but I just thought like architecturally it would be nice for the verifiers to be able to ask for stuff if they needed to. I also looked into how we could change the plugin a little bit to, rather than the plugin being passed, like today the verifier is passed the entire configuration and it essentially rehydrates the refer store. And it would be possible for us instead to, we could use RPC and we could pass an interface to the verifier so that it could make calls using the refer store, but back to the executor. So the verifiers would then not have to be concerned with building a refer store and configuring it.
I think that makes sense. And we discussed a model where you pass the interface on to the respective verifiers, right? We did go through a bunch of these different options. The one scenario was we wanted to delegate things like, if there is a child object, let's say, for example, an SBOM, we know it's a signature and notary and signatures are all happy. There is a scenario where the nested artifact is also requested by the verifier. But given that it's a hypothetical scenario, maybe we can optimize for the real world ones, which is we don't have that problem right now. So as long as we have provisions to, when this thing comes along, we know how to change it, that might be okay, and optimize for the very simple case of, for an SBOM or for a signature, the blob is also passed along as inlined data or as an inlined blob in some way. And that's also another thing that we can discuss if we want to. But it is a model which will only work for one blob or an array of, or maybe a collection of bytes. And in the end, you end up returning exactly what the manifest is, which is, I have a blob, I have the media type, I have the digest and things like that. So it would be duplicating what that API looks like. I don't know at this point. If we did update the contract, what do we pass in?
It was originally written to pass the, let's take the reference manifest, right? The actual signature, let's take the signature reference. It passes the signature blob and the signature manifest. It was originally written like that, but later there was a need where we had to query from the store again in the verifier. And I remember we extended it, but right now, as I told, I don't remember that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, that's fine. I think both models are valid. It's just that if one model works well and is tested, then, and if it solves 90% of the base use case, then the second model can be iteratively added depending on the scenario coming in, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's circle back. That's fine.
Yeah, we can circle back on that. Yeah.
Cool. Jimmy, you had something to discuss?
Yeah. So in the discussions portion of the GitHub repo, I had put in a gatekeeper audit interval discussion last week, and it talks about basically the audit interval that's set up for gatekeeper on policies. And what I noticed was that it looked like to me that the policy was auditing on a regular basis, which is 60 seconds by default. So it looked like to me that when that policy would audit, it was making calls to the external data provider, which was Ratify. And it looked like Ratify was making calls out to Azure ECR. because that's what I was using to test against at the time. So my concern here is that up until now, without an external data provider, these audit policy settings have been, innocuous. But now we're talking about every 60 seconds, Ratify is going to go out and make a call to a remote registry. I don't think that's great. I've reached out to some folks. I've reached out to the general OPA gatekeeper Slack channel and asked if there was a way to turn off audits for specific constraints. So specifically say, hey, don't audit this because we know it's reaching out to a external data provider and I don't want to, keep sending messages externally. I haven't got any response back. Obviously, a lot of people are busy right now with KubeCon, but I think we need to take a look at this. And so my question basically was, is it really making calls out to Azure every time Gatekeeper audits? And if it is, I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think we want to continually make calls outside the.
There is one scenario that I can think of where 60 seconds is too aggressive. That's a separate. So we're on the same page there. The other scenario is, for example, if scan results come or if signatures expire, we don't want to kind of redeploy to have an audit event fire saying that the signature or a scan result is invalid. So I think that is a scenario where I would expect some kind of like reset, but it would be a warning. It won't kind of like make sure you don't stop the deployment and things like that. So my understanding is that is where the continuous update after verifiers makes sense. But 60 seconds seems very aggressive.
Well, I mean, you can change the 60 seconds interval, but I'm not aware that you can make these changes at the constraint level.
I see. Okay. So that seems challenging then.
Yeah.
So the current implementation uses a cache mechanism. So there is like a pod level cache for the ORAS OCI client. So for all of those manifests, the first time it pulls them, the pod, it will go make a request to the registry, but the next time it pulls them, I think it uses the local cache. So you shouldn't be requesting the artifacts every audit cycle from the registry for artifacts that you've pulled before. But
yeah, the logs aren't clear. I mean, at least in the info level logging that's turned on by default in Ratify, it basically says subject for request of post. So it looks like it's posting every single time that the audit interval kicks off, which is every 60 seconds. So maybe if it's not doing that, then we need to be probably better with what log message it is, like pulled from cache or whatever.
So this post is a received post from Gatekeeper. So this is saying that /Ratify/Gatekeeper v1 verify is a Ratify pod endpoint. So this is just saying that Gatekeeper called out to Ratify.
Okay.
And then as far as the call from Ratify to the registry, that follows the model that I had just talked about. But that whole way that it works today is still an open question, because we had talked about some amount of caching, but we also had talked about some amount of cache invalidation that doesn't work. And with the implementation of the OCI client that we use through ORAS, I don't know if we have the ability to do that outside of like blowing away stuff on the file system periodically. So yeah, we still have to figure out how we want to handle artifact caching.
Are we seeing the need here to cache not at the the store level, like beyond at the executor level? Are we seeing the need to cache the result? Because I remember we had some discussions around this caching at the executor level to alleviate that issue, the timeout issue that we had for the Gatekeeper. I know that's no longer an issue, but
So
do we see a need here to cache at the executor level, the result of it?
So I think if we do if there is a need to cache, I think it needs to be configurable,
Yes,
including
yes,
like
Yeah.
the ability to disable it.
correct.
Yeah. So I see what you're saying. Like if a company has 300 clusters and they have thousands of deployments across all those clusters, every 60 seconds, every one of those is going to
Exactly.
hammer some registry, some poor registry. So yeah, I see what you're saying there. And the
So
answer is yeah.
I can reach out to the folks, and I mean, I reached out to them like a week or so ago, and they didn't. There was no reply from the entire Slack channel. I mean, I can reach out to like Max or Rita or even Will. Maybe they, I can copy those guys, but I know they're pretty busy with KubeCon right now. So, but I looked everywhere I could find no documentation about how you could do like constraint level audit settings.
Yeah, I don't know if you can do that, but at least at our level, it still probably makes sense for us to do some like after tag to digest. Like if we take the SHA, we could probably cache the result on that for some amount of time. I think would be reasonable from an audit perspective.
Yep. So, I mean, at a minimum, you can change the audit interval at the gatekeeper system level, but I don't think you can. I mean, I haven't seen where you can do it at a constraint level, but I'll reach out to the gatekeeper folks again.
Yeah. Plus, anything that we can do within Ratify to keep people from having to monkey with the gatekeeper installation would be ideal, because there's also a lot of people who probably have gatekeeper if they're using it in a more like advanced fashion. They probably have a bunch of things that are set up for their own purposes, and the more that we can, stay out of that, from having to tell them, oh yeah, if you want to use Ratify, you have to use XYZ is probably better.
Yeah, I think you're right. All right. Well, I'll reach out to, I guess I'll reach out to Max, Rita, and Will and ask them.
I agree, because gatekeeper is just one client to Ratify, right? We need to think from other clients and provide that generic model.
Yeah, I mean, for right now, I'm focusing on gatekeeper, but Caverno does virtually the same thing with their background policies. So,
okay.
Akash, you have a question? Go ahead.
I just wanted to provide a little bit more details on the current implementation. So for the Aura store, we cache at getting the actual manifest contents and then the blobs in the manifest. But every time we have to hit the registries refers endpoint to actually get the list of artifacts that are associated. So that call, we can't really do anything unless we keep track of on our end that, hey, these are the artifacts that are associated with this this subject. So, and if you attach a new signature, then you're going to need to make that call again. So figuring out when do we check again. So.
I see. I have a question on the audit. So what is the purpose of the audit? So let's say the initial deployment went through, and let's say the next audit fails. What will happen to the running image?
So first off, the audit is a gatekeeper thing. So the way that it manifests right now in the current quick start is that you'll see every 60 seconds, you'll see the logs that I posted there in that discussion. So what it means for Ratify, I don't know if I can answer that beyond what I put in the discussion, but I mean, I was looking at it primarily from a gatekeeper thing.
Oh, okay.
Maybe
I can
Eric
maybe
or Josh.
try this.
So they would set up alerts on this audit so that they get to monitor what's going on in their system, I think, so that.
I see. So it wouldn't stop the running pod.
Exactly.
No, it will not. It will not.
I think
No.
they'll get that informed. They'll security teams or whoever is monitoring, they'll be informed.
So Yeah, you can think of when they were building Gatekeeper several years ago, they wanted to come up with a way to not necessarily enforce every policy, but at least maybe get an impact on what the policies would be once they put a Gatekeeper policy in place. So that's where the audit came in. And there was also another issue with Gatekeeper and OPA and all of them, and that was, can they be set up to fail open or closed? Meaning, if the API server tries to make a call out the Gatekeeper to validate an inbound request and Gatekeeper does not respond, should that fail open or close? If it fails closed, then the API server basically stops the state changes in the cluster, and the cluster, could brick itself. Failing open would mean that you would not brick the cluster if the API server could not reach Gatekeeper successfully within that time window. However, failing open, would also run the risk of not stopping everything you wanted to stop. So that's another reason the audit came in, is if I can't reach Gatekeeper or it doesn't respond within that time window, at least every 60 seconds or whatever the audit interval is, I would be auditing, based on the constraints that are, based on the policies that are out there, and it would at least log somewhere that these things are, passing or failing these policies.
I see. So there's a report that the user can pull up and look at all the audit result.
Depends how it's configured, but yeah, and there's a whole other white paper about policy management and policy reports, and you can have it configured to go out and set it up in the logs, or you can have it create policy reports, I believe. I know Caverno does it. I'm pretty sure Gatekeeper can do it as well.
Yeah, got it. Thanks for explaining.
I think with the Azure policy add-on, these gets pumped into directly. I think they are linked to Defender and on.
Oh, I see. So that's what the Azure policy add-ons also uses.
That is like the integration, the native integration of the Gatekeeper, Azure Kubernetes.
Yep.
They inform the Gatekeeper and manage it. So that way, those logs or whatever the audit logs, they go back to the log analytics. Everything can be viewed through Azure Monitor or Microsoft Defender. All those.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks, Teja. Okay. Okay, so sorry. To summarize the action item, that is Jimmy will reach out to the Gatekeeper community again. Is that correct, Jimmy?
Yeah, I'm not going to reach out to the whole community this time. I'm going to target
specific
Max, Rita,
yeah.
and Will, and see if I can get them to respond to me.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
And do we have an issue for result caching already?
At the executor level?
Yeah.
I'm going to search for it. Executor. We don't. I can make one.
Okay.
Okay, I'll just take a note there. Okay. So yes, so we're at 54 issues, and Lee created a list of the proposal. I think it's this one, with which items would support the primary goals and which items are nice to haves. And so please take a look, and we can discuss asynchronously, or we can review them again with Lee when he comes back next week. Okay, that's everything on the agenda. Anything else?
So do we foresee any complications with the notation client fluctuation that's happening right now with adopting new libraries? Are we keeping track of that? And
it's part of another portion of my team that's helping with the notation client, and this is another part of my team, so I'm hoping that they'll bridge.
Okay.
And
okay, good.
When you say, you mean from Ratify's integration with notation?
Yeah. So the way that I understand it, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I was under the impression that the notation client was being used by Ratify. And because the notation client is looking to retool some of its plumbing, so
Right.
to speak, I thought that
So-
that would have downstream issues with us.
So we within Ratify, we depend directly on the library portion. So Notation has the CLI, and
Yeah.
they have their library, which supports the core functionality. And Ratify has a verifier whose implementation depends directly on the library portion. So we're not inheriting any of the fluctuation that's happening, but in the future, some amount of the stuff that is in the CLI portion is going to get pushed down into the core library. So we will get extra functionality, but we're not impacted right now as far as Ratify's consumption of notation goes.
One challenging area that we haven't yet finalized on is, I believe Millen from AWS has published the trust policy specification that notation will understand. So for a given image, how do you identify which certificate to use and things like that? So there's a binding mechanism, and the notation client libraries will have a way to kind of like discover the binding with the underlying image and so forth. That portion will come, and we need to figure out how we can kind of plumb the configuration for the notation part into the sub portion of Ratify. I think we have an example where notation configuration can be taken, but I think we'll have to maybe do one round of design and making the workflow work, where somebody can say that, hey, this is the notation trust policy I want you to use. Stick it into the Ratify configuration somehow and flow that through. And then the binding for the respective certificates and the scopes and all those things work. I'm tracking that, but there's no issue on Ratify yet. We'll have to create that.
Yeah, so the document for how that works was merged, but the implementation is still ongoing, correct?
Yeah, that's the implementation just started there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so as that, we could plan based on the document at least how we might want to support that, and then I guess we'll have to feel it out as the implementation materializes.
Right. That's one challenging area, but I think we kind of have an idea because it'll be in the client library, so we won't have to do much besides pointing it to a configuration section.
All right, cool. Well, I mean, as long as someone's tracking it, I mean, I guess I just assumed when I said notation client, I kind of meant the libraries too, not just the CLI. But yeah, seems like someone's on it. So, I don't think we have to worry about it.
I do have to worry about it.
Well, I mean, I don't think we have, I feel better that someone is worried about it, not just me. Someone has a whole lot more insight than I do.
Yeah, it's Eric is struggling with trying to bridge the search store, and there's a specification on the notation side of the search need to be laid out. All that just got finalized the last couple of weeks, so it's not made it into usable code yet. So we're just waiting for that side of the fence to get it completed, and then hopefully absorb it into this into the updated version of Ratify is the next step.
Yeah, there's I'm sure someday in the near future there's going to be some giant PR that makes some gray hairs for me, but right now it's just it's blissfully a document. So for now I think we're okay.
Cool.
All right. Thanks, folks. I need to drop.
Thanks for joining, everyone. See you all next week.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye, Teja.
Bye all.
Bye, Jimmy.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.